Hello and welcome to the SimpleMed Cardiology Lecture Series. My name is Dr Aaron Yip and I am the Cardiology Lead. Today's lecture will be on the anatomy of the cardiovascular system. This lecture is aimed at preclinical or phase 1 medical students and allied health professionals, and so it is pitched at that level. Let's have a look at some learning objectives. We're going to have a look at what makes up the cardiovascular system and its function. We're going to look at the anatomy of the heart and how blood flows through the heart. We're going to have a look at the anatomy of the blood vessels in the body. And finally, we're going to begin to map out the systemic vasculature. So what is the cardiovascular system? The cardiovascular system is a network of vessels joined together to create the body's transport system. This system includes the heart, the main driving force of the system, the blood vessels, the roadwork or pipes of the system, the blood, the contents of this system, and often the lymphatic system can be considered to be a part of this. So what does the cardiovascular system do? It has a role in facilitating the transport of essential substances to the desired location, substances such as oxygen, nutrients, and hormones. As well as transporting beneficial products, it also provides a means of removing toxic products such as carbon dioxide and lactic acid. It also has a role in aiding regulation of body temperature, and it also helps the body to protect itself from an infection. Let's have a look at the anatomy of the heart. Starting with the heart wall, it consists of 3 distinct layers. The outermost layer is the epicardium. This is a fibrous structure which surrounds the heart, and in this layer we can find the blood vessels and nerves which supply the heart. The epicardium is also part of a larger structure known as the pericardium. This is something I will cover in the next slide. In the middle, we have the myocardium, the thickest layer. This is a layer of muscle which contracts and allows the heart to pump blood. And finally, we have the endocardium, a layer of endothelial and connective tissue. The function of this layer is to allow blood to flow smoothly over the top. It aids in embryological development. And we are also able to find the heart's conduction system under this layer. The pericardium. This is a serous membrane. This is a layer of smooth mesothelium which lines closed body cavities and organs. Examples include the pericardium, which surrounds the heart and the base of the great vessels, the pleura, which surrounds the lungs and the thoracic cavity, the peritoneum. This surrounds the abdominal organs and abdominal cavity. So what makes up the pericardium? There's a fibrous layer, there's a serous layer, which consists of 2 parts, the parietal and the visceral layer. So what functions does the pericardium have? It has many protective qualities thanks to the fibrous layer. It prevents the heart from overfilling and increasing in size rapidly. It also protects the heart from mechanical and infective insults. The serous layer is able to secrete serous fluid which acts as lubrication and helps reduce friction as the heart moves around in the thoracic cavity. It also keeps the organ in position and limits its movement. One clinical point I want to mention is that although the characteristics of the pericardium enables it to carry out its role well, its features can be a double-edged sword. And what do I mean by that? Due to the restrictive nature of the fibrous layer, should a bleed occur in the pericardium, this can quickly accumulate, eventually subjecting the heart to high pressures and restrict the heart from pumping. Early surgical intervention is effective in resolving this. This condition is known as a cardiac tamponade. As we look inside the heart, we see the heart is divided into 2 halves. The right side, which is responsible for the deoxygenated blood, the left side, responsible for the oxygenated blood. Each side has its own atrium and ventricle. We can also see the great vessels bringing blood into and away from the heart. We also have 4 valves within the heart, 2 atrioventricular valves between each pair of atrium and ventricle, 2 semilunar valves found between the ventricle and its corresponding great vessel. Let's have a look at how blood flows through the heart. Starting from the right side, the vena cava, both superior and inferior, are our first great vessels. The deoxygenated blood from the rest of the body is emptied into our right atrium. This then flows into our right ventricle, and this is attached to our next great vessel, the pulmonary artery. This takes our deoxygenated blood into the pulmonary trunk and then our lungs, where the blood becomes oxygenated again. Following this, the blood is transported back into the heart via the pulmonary veins, into the left atrium, and then into the left ventricle, where this is sent through our final great vessel, the aorta, the largest artery in our body. The oxygenated blood is sent through the systemic circulation and becomes deoxygenated again, and this cycle begins again. Let's talk about the structure of the valves. Firstly, the atrioventricular valves, on the right side with the tricuspid valve, on the left side with the mitral valve. They are attached to the heart to the wall of the ventricles by the chordae tendineae, sometimes referred to as the heartstrings. In the ventricular wall, there are also papillary muscles present which help anchor the chordae tendineae. Together, they help prevent the valves from prolapsing. This is when the heart valves invert on itself due to the pressure of the blood flow. In comparison, the semilunar valves do not have chordae tendineae. Instead, they are embedded into the great vessels. They also have a cup shape to them to try and prevent any backflow of blood. Top tip to remembering the names of the heart valves. The phrase "try to be right" always helps me remember that the tricuspid valve is on the right side. The semilunar valves are named after the corresponding great vessel. So the pulmonary artery has the pulmonary valve. The aorta has the aortic valve. Onto the blood vessels of the body. We have three main types of blood vessels in the body: the arteries, veins, and capillaries. The arteries carries blood away from the heart, and the veins carry blood to the heart. The structure of the artery and veins consists of three layers. From the outside, we have the tunica externa, or the adventitia, which contains collagen and elastic fibers. This allows anchoring of the vessel to nearby structures. Then we have the tunica media, a layer of smooth muscle which allows constriction and dilation of the blood vessels. The tunica intima, which is an epithelial layer in the inside which allows blood to flow smoothly inside the vessels. The arteries and veins essentially have the same structure with only minor differences due to the nature of their role. Arteries have generally thicker tunica media layers because they work under higher pressures. Veins have valves throughout the structure to prevent backflow of blood because of a lower pressure. Arteries also have a smaller lumen, which is the diameter of the structure because it needs to maintain a higher blood pressure. Capillaries are the smallest blood vessels in the body. They are made up of a single layer of flattened endothelial cells. They form the connection between arteries and veins. How? The arterial lumen gradually becomes smaller, branching into vessels known as the arterioles. These connect to the capillaries, which in turn joins to the venules, which is connected to the veins. There are three types of capillaries in the body. We have the continuous type. Their structure consists of a mainly uninterrupted layer of endothelium with occasional intercellular clefts that are just big enough for small molecules such as gas and ions to pass through, typically found in the nervous system, fat, skin, and muscle. Next, with the fenestrated type, they contain fenestrations, essentially gaps between its structure. This is typically found in areas which require continuous exchange between your blood and tissues, such as the small intestines and kidneys. And finally, with the sinusoid type, these have the largest gap of the three types. They allow exchange of large molecules found in the liver, spleen, and bone marrow, which is essential because they allow newly formed blood cells to enter the circulation. Now let us have a look at the systemic circulation. Starting from the aorta is the main motorway in our body which supplies all the branches to our body. The aorta is split into four sections. Firstly, the ascending aorta. This is where the first branches come from, our coronary arteries. Secondly, we have the aortic arch. Three major branches come from this. Firstly, the largest of the three, the brachiocephalic. This gives off the right carotid and subclavian arteries. Then we have the left common carotid artery and the left subclavian artery. The third section is the thoracic aorta, or otherwise known as the descending aorta. Some branches of note include the bronchial arteries and the esophageal arteries. And finally, we have the abdominal aorta. Three arteries of note in this branch is the celiac, and the superior and inferior mesenteric arteries. Ultimately, the aorta bifurcates or splits into two, becoming the two common iliac arteries which supply the lower body. As you can imagine, in a clinical scenario, should any problems arise in the aorta, it can be quite detrimental. Venous blood follows a similar path to the arteries, culminating into superior and inferior vena cava. I want to have a look at the blood supply to the heart. Arterial supply to the heart comes from our two coronary arteries, the right and the left, the first branches of the aorta, arising from the right and left aortic sinuses. Following the route of the right coronary artery first, it travels to the posterior aspect of the heart, forming the posterior descending artery. On its way there, it branches into the sinoatrial nodal branch and the right marginal branch. The left coronary artery branches into the left anterior descending and left circumflex artery. As it travels posterior, it becomes the left marginal branch. So why is knowing the coronary arteries important? That's because certain arteries are responsible for specific areas of the heart, so knowing it can be useful. The anterior and inferior aspect of the heart is supplied by the right coronary artery. The lateral aspect is covered by the left circumflex. The septal region is covered by the left anterior descending. The venous circulation of the heart all culminates into the coronary sinuses, where it is all eventually drained back into the right atrium. Some contributing veins include the great cardiac vein, the small cardiac vein, and the middle cardiac vein. To conclude, that was quite a lot of information to take in, but we began to lay the foundations of the cardiovascular system. To summarize some salient points, the cardiovascular system has a role in transportation of both beneficial and waste products, and also has protective features to the body. We had a look at the anatomy of the heart wall and its three layers. We had a look at the pericardium, the structure which surrounds the heart and the protection it provides to the heart. We had a look inside the heart, talked about the structure of the chambers, valves, and great vessels. We learned about the different types of capillaries and their locations. We learned about the different blood vessels and the anatomical differences in them. We began to map out the systemic circulation by following the aorta and the branches it gives off. And finally, we had looked at the coronary arterial circulation and its relevance. That is the end of this lecture. Be sure to check out simplemed.co.uk for hundreds of free articles, thousands of free questions, and any support with questions you might need. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.